Bitcoin represents, I think of it like, it's like an aqueduct dam type system. I have a dam or a reservoir, and I have a set of pipes.
You had a tweet in 2013 saying Bitcoin's going to go the way of online gambling. You said in an interview that you don't even remember sending the tweet. It's probably just something you sent. And obviously you've changed your tune on that, because between you and your company, Microstrategy, you own almost, well, you and Microstrategy combined own about 140,000 Bitcoin. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I think of Bitcoin as it's digital energy, and it's also digital money, and it's digital property. And it reflects such a profound new idea that unless you spend 10 or 100 hours or more, and unless you have a need to embrace a new idea, you wouldn't really appreciate it and understand it. So if someone just pokes you and says, what's your opinion of it? And you spend half an hour thinking about it, normally you've got a kind of ignorant reaction based upon imperfect models and imperfect understanding. And it's only when you get to the point in your life when you need it and you need to understand it, or you have an inspirational experience that forces you to dig a bit deeper, do you start to form a more nuanced view. I think the biggest problem that we face as a civilization is conservation of energy. How do I conserve energy over time? And that's the inflation and the degradation problem. A secondary issue is how do you move energy through space, the transactional problem. That's kind of tactical, but the strategic issue is what's the half-life of your energy, right? If I give you food in a container and it's good for like a day, well, you got to eat it in a day. How do you store food for a decade? It's a challenge, right? And if I give you energy and the half-life of the energy is 3 years, then you can only plan with a 3-year time horizon. I think when you have energy in the form of money, right? Money is monetary energy, it's economic energy. So if I have economic energy and I'm storing it in a fiat currency that's hyperinflating, that means that the half-life of the energy is 1 year. If the currency is inflating at the rate of 7% a year, the half-life of the energy is 10 years. If I put that money into gold and gold's inflating at 2% a year, the half-life of the energy is 35 years. If I put the money into a building and the building has a useful life of 100 years, the half-life of the energy is 50 years. In 100 years, the building's gone. So what if I wanted the half-life of the energy to be 1,000 years or 10,000 years? How do I make something last forever? That fundamentally, the real issue with the human race is how do I make something last forever? How do I achieve immortal life? If I want something to circle the globe forever, I put it in orbit. If I get it almost in orbit, it crashes to Earth, right? Yeah. Almost in orbit is not in orbit. If I get it in orbit, it'll circle around the world forever. But if I get it out of orbit, if I can reach escape velocity, it'll circle the sun forever. And maybe if I beat the sun's escape velocity, it'll circle, a galaxy forever. So how do I conserve energy or how do I propagate energy forever? And Bitcoin is a solution to this problem. Paper money isn't a solution to the problem. Land and buildings aren't really a good solution. Gold isn't a good solution. And it's not so different than saying, what if I wanted to build a city and I told you that the rock you're building the city on was only going to sink at 1 foot a decade? Okay, well, if Venice was sinking at 1 foot a decade, where does that leave us? Now, 1 foot, 100 years is still a bit of a problem. I mean, you lose 2 or 3 feet over 300 years and you're underwater in some places. So I really need something that's not going to deflect. It's not going to move, not 1 inch in 100 years, right? And if we look at things that advance the human race, steel's an example of a low deflection form of metallic energy. The difference between building a building with steel and building a building with clay or wood, right? Or, fill in the blank, right? Some other material, it's pretty profound. And building a city on granite or schist versus sand or swampland is pretty profound. Building an economic system, a company, a country, an institution on Bitcoin, as opposed to on Venezuelan bolivars, right? How long is your company going to last on a currency which is hyperinflating, right? Not 5 years. How long will your company last built on a currency like the US dollar? You said the US dollar lost 99.5% of its value over 80 years. Bitcoin represents, a liquid, fungible, synthetic asset that you can use to build a balance sheet. If you're a family, a company, a country, you can move it anywhere, right? It doesn't degrade, right? The maintenance cost is lower than any other form of asset. And if you know that you're building on a firm foundation, you can look out 100 years or 1,000 years. And, that's a profound idea. But now there's this concept of digital energy, and people think, well, what is it? I don't even believe it is. What? Well, I could put $1 billion, on one end of the planet, convert $1 billion of fiat currency into $1 billion of Bitcoin, move it to the other end of the planet in an hour, and convert it back into Japanese yen and convert that into electricity and electrocute you with it, or convert it into, mechanical energy, or convert it into cars, or convert it into buildings, right? $1 billion moving over a wire becomes whatever you want it to be. And what is energy? Energy is matter. Matter is energy. There is conservation of energy. Matter is low frequency energy. You slow down energy and you get steel. You speed it up. I set things on fire. I take a piece of wood, looks like matter. I set it on fire and it becomes light and heat. What happened to the wood, right? All of these are just transformations. And the human race really hasn't had the ability to transform energy into digital form. And once you do it, you realize that it's profound impact on the concept of property. What if I could have digital property? What is property? Property is low frequency money. What is money? Mid frequency energy. If I have $1 billion and hold it for 30 years, it's digital property. If I could put it in a building, then it's physical property. I could put it in Bitcoin, then it's digital property. What if I speed it up a bit and I pay for your coffee with it? Now it looks like digital money. What if I speed it up a lot and I do 100,000 transactions a minute with it? Well, it's digital energy. So the human race is moving forward through channeling energy. Bitcoin's just the latest chapter in that story. It's, what if I could take $1 billion worth of electricity and put it in the palm of my hand, send it anywhere on Earth, store it for 100 years and not lose any of it? That's a pretty profound idea. I think that the key to advancing this is examples. We need to build it into technology. Like when Cash App built support for Bitcoin, that was this big step forward. When they built support for Lightning, a second step forward. When Cash App lets you move 1 Bitcoin from me to you for free on the Cash network, that's the layer 3. It's a third step forward, right? So here's big idea, right? Bitcoin's got $800 billion worth of energy on the main net, on the level 1. You can move that energy in minutes for dollars. But when that energy flows to the layer 2, Lightning, you can move that energy in seconds for a penny. Pennies, maybe fraction of pennies. And when that energy moves to layer 3, Cash App is layer 3, Binance is a layer 3, Coinbase is a layer 3, FTX is a layer 3. When it moves to a layer 3, you can move that in milliseconds. And one big idea is high velocity money, high velocity energy, flexible, portable property. But the second big idea is property with a half-life of forever. That's a big idea.
That's huge.
Human race has never, what's the longest lived property before Bitcoin, right? You say gold, well, gold, you can burn a building and the gold will still be underneath the building. So yeah, it's kind of indestructible in that way, but as property, as an energy container, it's still bleeding at 30, every 35 years, it's bleeding out under the best of circumstances, half its energy. So the best conceivable idea I think we had is gold. It's storing my money in a Picasso or in a Leonardo da Vinci painting strikes me as being a bit of a crapshoot, right? Because what if people don't like Leonardo da Vinci in 500 years? So coming up with a way to store economic energy for 100 years or 1,000 years is a challenge. And what if I told you, right, the human race, the longest we ever managed to get anything to live economically was 35 years. And now we just came up with this thing that has a theoretical life of forever. And the solution to cleaning up cyberspace and the solution to creating beautiful products in cyberspace is to introduce conservation of energy. And to do that, you need digital money, digital property, but mostly you need digital energy. You need the ability to wrap your avatar in a layer of digital energy so that if you click through 10,000 things a day or 100,000 things a day, as long as you're a decent, well-mannered cyber citizen, you move friction-free. But if you go and attempt to smash up someone's website 1 million times a day, there should be a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
If you attempt to accost or victimize or abuse or harass 1 million people an hour, there should be a penalty. And when there is, we will be monetizing malice.
Mm-hmm.
And malicious behavior will be degraded by 99.99% most likely. And that will be a beautiful world. Truth and consequence in cyberspace. That's the here and now opportunity / imperative. It's the technology imperative for Bitcoin. And sure, I want to live forever, or I want my money to live forever, but that's 1,000 years out. I would like for things to be beautiful and safe and functional now. And that's also a useful application of digital energy. Bitcoin represents, I think of it like, it's like an aqueduct dam type system. I have a dam or a reservoir, and I have a set of pipes. How much energy is in the system? Well, none if there's no water in the system. What's the cost to build the dam and the pipes, right? When the Romans built the aqueduct system, right, they probably had a dam and they probably had aqueducts. There's a cost to build it. That's a fixed cost. Then there's a cost to maintain it. Now, how much energy can you channel with it? Well, plus or minus a factor of 10 or a factor of 100, right? Probably orders of magnitude difference is the amount of energy. Now, what's the equivalent here? Well, Bitcoin miners, right? The Bitcoin mining system is in essence, it's the fixed and the variable cost to maintain the system. And today, probably $4 or $5 billion a year is going into Bitcoin mining. If you consider the energy that flows into, in this case, the money that goes into buying energy and the money that goes into buying mining rigs, right? That's the maintenance cost of the system. And then how much economic energy can it move? And the answer is, it could move to 800 billion and it could store 800 billion. I think there's two numbers of interest, right? There's how much is it storing? We know that number, about 800 billion. And then it's how much is moving, right? That's the transaction amount on the L1 blockchain. And that's more than 800 billion a year, I think. So could I actually put 8 trillion on it? Yeah, sure. You could put 8 trillion on it as easy as 800 billion. Could I put 80 billion on it? Yeah. So what determines how much economic energy is in the system? Well, if the US government decides to buy $100 billion of Bitcoin, right, then probably the value of Bitcoin is going to be squeezed up. Now the potential energy in the system is much higher. What is Bitcoin? It's a crypto container. What are the other containers for money? Metallic container in the form of gold. But the problem with gold is it's not a closed system, it's an open system, right? If I got 6 billion ounces of gold in the world and we keep adding 2% more a year, but if I've only got 21 million ounces of gold in the world and you could never make any more, then it would be a better container. But no one's come up with a physical commodity which is hard capped. We can't figure it out. So gold's not a very good monetary crucible. What about fiat currency? Well, the best one in the world was the dollar, and it lost 99.5% of its energy over 80 years. So not that good. What's the theoretical best one? Well, if God comes down from heaven above and creates this perfect ledger, and God said there's 21 million tokens, and God's going to keep track of it, and God is incorruptible, and no one can get to God and subpoena God to double the token supply. And if God makes the ledger available to everybody on earth and makes sure that whenever I give you 2, I get debited 2, then you've got a perfect monetary container, right? A perfect ledger. The big picture is the government CPI in the US is nearly 8%. That's the published number. The published producer price index is 10%. The published CPI numbers in other countries are higher, as much as double or triple higher. All of the published numbers are manipulated to be the lowest figure you could possibly create via market basket adjustments and hedonic adjustments. So if I talk to people that I know, they would say, well, real costs for producers are going up 15% or 20%. So the PPI is 10, but the real number is 20. The CPI, they say, is 8, but the real number for many consumer things are 12 to 16. The asset inflation rate is at least double the CPI. So if your goal is, we know that the Case-Shiller index is showing about 18%. So middle class home is up 18% year over year. You talk to a lot of people in big cities that say, like in Miami or New York or other places, they're up 20% or 25%. When I look at this, what I think is none of the monetary policy is going to stop the problem of asset inflation. It's probably not going to stop CPI and PPI inflation either. And the other important point to make is I think most people misunderstand inflation, and they misunderstand the cause of inflation as well, and they misunderstand what money is. The thing they misunderstand about inflation is it's completely a vector. There's 10,000 different numbers, and you need to calculate your own market basket of desirable products. And the desirable market basket should be assets, products, and services that you want in the location you intend to live. When you do that, you'll find that the real inflation rate is probably double to triple what the CPI is published in any given country. It doesn't matter whether it's Argentina or Venezuela or Turkey or the US. It's generally always double to triple. I think that the conclusion is inflation is much higher than you thought it was. And the sources of inflation are from a dozen different places, all of them generally related to public policy, every policy. Energy policy, you want to get all your energy from solar panels, right? That drives up the price of energy. Every single policy conceivable drives inflation. The more government you have, the more inflation you have. As the government increases its scope, as the scope of government increases, the scope of the currency supply increases, as well as the scope of regulation, thereby impairing the production of goods and services, creating more scarcity, driving up price, undermining market systems that would otherwise attempt to clear the market by by matching supply and demand. But how do you match supply and demand if the supply's in China and the demand's in the US and there's a tariff, right, sitting between the two? You can't match the supply and the demand. So the conclusion is, right, none of these policies are going to stop inflation. Inflation will continue. And, you know, even if I had the ability to change every single government policy on earth for every country, right? It's not likely that I can affect all those things overnight. So I would say that you're better off served looking for a way to protect your own life savings